Welcome to the Brave Business Podcast, brought to you by accounting, tax, audit and advisory firm Blick Rothenberg. Brave by name and brave by nature, this series is different. Aimed at entrepreneurial businesses, we focus on providing practical guidance, timely insights and professional opinions from industry experts, helping you make informed decisions for your business. I'm Declan Curry, journalist and broadcaster. In today's episode, we're going to look at the challenges and opportunities faced by entrepreneurs in the rapidly evolving technology sector. We'll also look at government support for startups and what's involved in selling your business to a private equity firm. I'm delighted that to talk about all of this with us, we have Parry Malm, who's a serial entrepreneur. One of the businesses that he founded is Phrasee, and he'll talk a bit more about that in just a moment. And alongside him is Blick Rothenberg partner Susie, Mullin. Welcome both of you to our discussions. Parry, let's start with you. Phrasee, what is it? What does it do?
Phrasee is generative AI. Now, before I hear you groan, we were doing it before it was cool. I founded the business in 2015 with the simple vision to improve the language that marketers use. And there's a whole backstory to it as to why I picked that specific area. But, you know, one thing led to another, and the company really took off. And now it stands as one of the oldest, most reputable firms in what is a fast burgeoning space.
So it's using artificial intelligence to deliver a service to clients that need it.
Exactly. So the basic use case when we first started is we wanted to make the email subject lines that companies use in their mass marketing campaigns to use better language. So we built an AI model that could generate that language and then optimize off the results it got. As the years went on, obviously, this technology expanded out quite a bit further. And we were first the party with generative AI. Like back in 2015, most people couldn't even spell AI, let alone know what it was talking about. Now, everybody, according to Twitter and LinkedIn, is an expert on it. But we were there before it was cool.
And given that you were there before others, did that make it more exciting to set up the business? Did it make it more challenging to set up the business? You know, how much of your time were you spending explaining this to people?
You know, market education was always one of the huge challenges which we face because people don't always realize that a problem exists if the solution is not apparent to it. So we spent a lot of time educating the market. Those first few years, I mean, I schlepped all around the world just getting on any parapet and saying like, this is possible. You know, people were at that point, they didn't believe that a machine could write like a human, let alone better than humans. Now, of course, with all of the innovations in the market from companies like OpenAI, it seems reasonably common knowledge that machines are capable of doing this. Although I think we're certainly in the peak of inflated expectations in the technology cycle.
And the customers were who?
The customers were big brands, basically, big consumer-facing brands. We worked with the likes of Sainsbury's and Tesco's and Curry's in the UK, in the US, a bunch of contemporary companies like that.
I'm just wondering, and I'm sure some of our listeners will have noticed that you learned your English somewhere else, if I can put it like that, which meant you could have set up a business like this anywhere. It's a global-facing business. It's a world-straddling technology. Why here?
Well, so I grew up in Vancouver in Canada, so that's the funny accent. I try not to say A too much, but I do know how to throw a punch on skates, so you better be nice to me here. So I moved to the UK in 2006, quite a few years ago, and in the middle I lived in Amsterdam for a couple of years, came back to London. The real answer is I started it just because I was here. And I didn't want to go anywhere else and I didn't know any better. But the more manicured answer, of course, is that in terms of world centers where you want to start a technology business, you need a couple of things. You need, number one, access to capital. London is probably one of the top 2 or 3 cities in the world, maybe after San Francisco and New York, to get access to capital. 2, you need access to a concentrated group of possible buyers. London, of course, has that in spades, much more than most other cities on the planet. And then thirdly, you need access to a diverse talent pool, and you need access to engineers and marketers and all of these various things. And by virtue of being both a big city and a natural magnet for talented people from throughout the world, it was a real boon to us. Now, of course, that has decayed somewhat since the 2016 referendum, but London still has the best engineers, the best marketers in the world, particularly from Europe, who gravitate here.
And Susie Mullin from Blick Rothenberg, that's the holy trinity, isn't it? It's the access to capital, the access to talent, the access to customers. That makes the UK enormously attractive to entrepreneurs the world over.
Yeah, I think that's right. Look, I do tons of business sales. That's pretty much all that I do is advise on tax on that. And I don't do any of those where there are not at least one, if not two, key individuals who are not from the UK, and they're predominantly from, the Europe and the US. So I think that's right. It's a very attractive place to set up your business.
And Parry, in terms of how easy it is to set up a business here in the UK, how do we compare with the rest of the world?
I founded a new business yesterday, actually, and it took my wife actually about 30 minutes online. I think if you were to do that in most other countries, it would be quite difficult. I know that particularly in continental Europe, there's much more of a bureaucratic burden. In the US, you have so many different jurisdictions due to the federal system. It can become quite complex. In the UK, it's really straightforward. So just Google company formations, and if you can't figure out how to use those websites, you probably shouldn't be starting a business.
And Susie, in terms of starting the business, what support is out there?
Yeah, so as a tax person, I guess I look at for people setting in the business in the UK, I look at three things really in terms of what is available to people and what incentivises entrepreneurs really. I look at what support is available in the early days. Once the company is incorporated, and I think the key one there is this kind of R&D tax credits, which are very, very beneficial. You can get cash refunds to the extent you spend money on innovation, which Parry's business and businesses like that will have. I think the access to capital that Parry mentions, we've got great tax incentives for investment into private companies. They are really, really beneficial for investors, but they really encourage a lot of private investment into startups. And then finally, the one that we'll talk about is the kind of incentive when you're actually selling your business, which is, how much capital gains tax will you pay, which is probably slightly less incentivizing than it used to be.
And Susie, that support that's available for entrepreneurs, is it good enough?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and Parry and I disagree on this a bit. But from my perspective, I remember the heady days of sort of 2010, 2011, when we had amazing entrepreneurs relief, which was kind of at its best. Entrepreneurs relief was 10 million at 10% if you sold your business, and more recently R&D credits have been reduced. So I feel that at one time R&D credits were better than they are now. Entrepreneurs relief for entrepreneurs was better than it was now. Now Parry and others will say, and government reports will say, nobody starts a business because they're motivated by 10% tax on sale, and I completely agree with that. But for me, there's something really important about an environment that has those incentives, because it's saying we want to encourage people to start businesses, to be entrepreneurial. We care about that, and we care about you, and we're trying to incentivize you. So for me, it's more about an entrepreneur-friendly environment, and withdrawing these reliefs and making them smaller, I think it's really unhelpful.
So it's about the signal.
For me, it's completely about the message. If you read the budgets, which you probably did, but if you read the budgets when entrepreneurs relief and those reliefs were introduced and increased, the budgets were about growing business, incentivizing business. We sounded exciting. Now when you listen to the budgets and they cut our reliefs, we don't sound like a place that's trying to grow or be exciting.
And politicians standing at the dispatch box in the House of Commons saying we want people to set up their own business.
And for me, it's not about the nickel and diming. It's not about the amount of tax. It's about the message that we send with our tax reliefs.
Parry, when you're starting the business, how important is it that support is there? Is it even something that you think about? Or are you so consumed with the great idea that you just charge on and do it and then hope everything else falls into place?
Well, I think there's probably people who know what they're doing, and then there's me. And when I started Phrasee, I always had the philosophy of just do it punk rock style. Just pick up a bunch of instruments, make some noise, and maybe it'll sound good, maybe it won't. As the company grew a bit more, I started to learn more about what incentives there were. And There are a couple of key ones. So about a year into the company, I raised a angel investment round. It's 150 grand at a 1.5 million valuation, which is small these days, but back then it felt like a lot. And we did that on what's called SEIS, which is the Seed Entrepreneur Investment Scheme, I believe it stands for. And what that effectively means is that any investment you make, the investor effectively writes that off from their tax bill and then doesn't pay capital gains tax on the proceeds. What was cool about that is that our angels were in the business for 7 years, and when I exited, they got a 66-1 on it, which was effectively tax-free. So we paid off a lot of mortgages, which is a nice outcome. The second one is entrepreneurs relief, which means that for the first $1 million that you take out of the company at point of exit, you only pay half capital gains, so 10% on it, which I think is a nice touch. It wasn't something that I thought of when I first started. These are all things that I figured out along the way and thought, well, if I could turn back time, I would have done nothing differently.
Really? You would do it differently based on what you learned from the first swing in the roundabout?
Well, the one thing that I would have done differently is I probably would have set up a trust because I was a non-domicile at the time. So I could have done some funny tax things with that. But honestly, I think that we have a moral obligation to pay tax. If you have a big liquidity event and you get a big tax bill, you should feel good about that tax bill, not try and nickel dime the government.
As the business was growing, when you started it, were you on your own? Was it with other people?
I started it with 2 co-founders and then 2 founding employees.
And as the business was growing, what were the stages where you thought, okay, we need help here. We need to consult with some experts on this issue or that development?
So early on, I got to know an investment banker who sort of guided and coached me throughout the years, which was very useful because it helped me think about, how I need to financially structure the business to gear towards some sort of a exit. I got to know him very early on. I hired in a chairman, I hired in a CFO, I hired in some real in-house professional help. And then as I was getting to the stage going, okay, it's probably about time to think about doing a proper exit. Then I brought on expert lawyers. I brought on expert tax people like Susie. And it was really at that stage. I think it's easy to get bogged down in the way you should be doing things when you just need to be out there doing things. And then when you have a particular goal and you don't have the skills for it, then bring in people. But I believe that nobody knows how to build and sell the company better than the person who runs that company. And if your time is not spent doing that, your time is spent doing something else.
But I just wonder, when is it that you first think about selling the company? You created this company, it's your baby. Are you thinking about selling it and planning for that from the very start, or is it something that just builds over time?
So I started the company with a 5-year plan to build an exit within 5 years. I think
that was clear from the start.
Yeah, but I think we did that after 7 years. So I was 40% late on the goal.
But it was always in your mind from the very start, I'm going to set this business up, but I want to sell it, and I want to sell it at roughly this time.
Yeah, one thing I've learned, one thing that I've seen happen is people build companies and they become emotionally attached to the companies themselves. And I can understand that because you put in, your blood, toil, tears, and sweat into building the company out. But ultimately, a company's purpose is to create value for shareholders. And I was and still am one of the biggest shareholders in the company. So my purpose is to create value for it. And one of the ways to create value is to build towards a material exit. Another way to create value is to create high profit margins and basically take out dividends each year. There are multiple ways, but if you're not generating value for shareholders, then you're not running the company appropriately.
And Susie, that's where you come back into the conversation at that stage now where the founders of the business are starting to plan the sale of the business. What should be in their minds? What should they be thinking about?
Yeah, so from a non-tax perspective, I think it's quite important that founders are really well advised and go through a really detailed thought process beforehand about what they're trying to achieve. Because I see lots of people going out to market and getting lots of offers, but perhaps not thinking long-term what they're actually trying to achieve. I think it's important to remember that if you're exiting completely, we see some non-serial entrepreneurs who are exiting completely, how much money they need, do that cash flow forecast, work out how much you need to sell for. And I think if you're selling as Parry did, selling a proportion of your business to someone else but staying in, I think you really need to think about the change that's going to be from owning that business and being able to make any decision you want to being owned by either private equity or trade and being very much restricted in decisions that you can make. So whilst I would say you should be thinking tax first, that's probably not true. You should be thinking about how the business is going to work going forward.
But really, that's about the emotional attachment as well.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And you said people shouldn't get too emotionally attached to it. But if you've been running the business and calling all the shots, what was that adjustment like to then working in a business that is run by somebody else?
Well, there's good sides and bad sides to it. So first of all, I de-risked myself personally. I bought a nice new house, taken some nice holidays. I mean, life is pretty good. But I think like the company had reached the size. I mean, we were up to like 100 and some employees. We had reached the size regardless of who the ultimate owners were. You stop running the company at that point. You've got lieutenants who run the company. And for me personally, being CEO of a company of that scale, I just didn't enjoy. I like building stuff. I like tackling problems. I like being the guy in the punk rock band. I've never wanted to be main stage at Glastonbury. It's just not in me.
You're the entrepreneur, not the administrator.
Absolutely. So really the change in control, I mean, I wouldn't say that it made it less enjoyable for me. It was the scale of the company that made it less enjoyable. So about a year ago, I decided it was time to step back. And so I went to our private equity overlords and explained my reasoning to them. And we basically worked with each other to find an external CEO to come in and take the reins. And he's taking the reins and he's doing a great job. So it's been a real win-win where I'm much happier, much less stressed out. I've met these people who live in my house who purport to be my wife and kids, which has been a nice change.
And you're happy the business is in good hands?
Absolutely. I've got complete trust in the new gaffer. He's doing a great job thus far. He's going to continue doing a great job. He'll take the company in a different direction than I would have. And that's exactly what the company needs.
When you were going through that process of looking for a buyer, finding a buyer, selecting a buyer, was it in your mind, I want this to be someone who's going to take care of the company and the people who are in it? Or was it just who's got the biggest bag of money?
No, it certainly wasn't. So we ran quite a wide process when we kicked off the exit process. We had I think I did 25 management meetings from which we got 8 offers. We shortlisted to 4, then went exclusive with 1. So we were a pretty hot business. There's a lot of people sniffing at it. I was doing a lot of Zoom calls.
And when was this?
This was late 21.
So we were out of lockdown by this.
Oh yeah, it was well lockdown. So the deal closed in Feb 22, and we were going through these machinations in sort of like Q4 of 21. And we had offers that like cash out to me personally would have been higher. We had offers for a full takeover. The one I actually went for was actually the smallest amount of cash out now. But I believed in the investors actually wanting to take the company to new heights, and I still do. I think they'll take it to new heights, and we'll have a second event in a number of years' time, which will be great for all people. What mattered to me is not like the preservation of the company itself. That's by the by. I think it's the preservation of the people who work there and make sure that they are treated fairly. And there's been, a lot of personnel change since the transaction happened. Some of it is driven by the different ownership structures. Some of it is driven by all the various macro concerns we've experienced in the last few months. But we've always done our best to make sure that people are treated fairly. And we're not perfect at it. We haven't always been perfect at it, but it's always our goal, because what's the point of making a bunch of money if you're an asshole?
There's a question that sometimes can't have an answer. And Susie, in this process, professional advisors like you and your colleagues, you're effectively holding their hands through this process.
Yeah. I mean, look, Parry obviously is like lots of entrepreneurs. They start businesses and they just do everything, by hook or by crook. They've not got loads of money. They want to use their money on growing their business. They don't think about all the little tax nuances they need to think about. So from our perspective, when we're doing what I think of as a first round sale, so a founder sale to someone, lots of our job is around almost unpicking what's happened and making sure that, that it presents well to the buyer and that we don't end up basically, as you would say, nickel and diming over silly things. So, and also helping everybody understand kind of how they get from A to B and how they're invested in the new co. So,
and the important tax is what? Is it capital gains?
Yeah, so look, super quickly, from a tax perspective, if you're selling your business, you want to pay capital gains. Parry and I disagree a little bit on the entrepreneur's relief, but you want to pay capital gains tax at least, so at 20%. You want to avoid paying any employment tax. When you sell and get some new securities, they will be within the scope of employment tax. It's quite important that you structure that properly, which is what advisors like I help with. And there's some other niggly tax things that you probably don't need to worry about. But yeah, it's really important to get decent tax advice when you're selling.
One really important thing is to make sure that your employee option agreements have been filed correctly. So when we first kicked the process off, we talked to a bunch of lawyers, a bunch of accountants, and all of them said the first thing we'll do is we'll audit your option agreements because they're always screwed up. And fortunately, we spent the money to get ours done correctly, so our employees got paid fairly when the exit happened. I've heard horror stories about the option agreements not being filed correctly and employees getting taxed at employment rates instead of at cap gains or half cap gains rates as you get if you file them correctly.
But I think that's right. But even, sorry, Parrot, to complain about your process, but even your process wasn't super straightforward. I think that you expect your tax scheme to be fairly logical. So, for example, you had a couple of employees, didn't you, who went to live outside of the UK, to work outside the UK during the pandemic. That happened to everyone. Nobody thought about the tax implications of that for people that held options. And actually, frankly, it's not good news. So if they went not to work for the company, but to kind of consult. So these problems arise that you wouldn't really think of. So that due diligence, checking everything's okay before someone else comes, and takes joy really in finding your mistakes.
I've just sort of like buried it in a little compartment in my head.
What are some of the other traps, the sort of the common things to look out for?
For me, big trap is definitely the EMI options. These startup businesses, EMI options, it's a share scheme for your employees effectively, which you can agree the price of the options with the revenue, and it broadly means employees don't need to pay to get their shares. They get them when they exercise the options, but it's very tax efficient for both the company and the employees, and those individuals might qualify for business asset disposal relief if they've held them for 2 years, so they're super beneficial for employees. But like all tax reliefs, they come with lots of complications. So that's the first one. And look, there is somebody, I advise sellers, there is somebody on the other side who advises the buyer, and their job is to find problems. We call it due diligence, but really it's finding problems. So their job is to see what's been done wrong. So that's why it's good to get involved early and look for those mistakes. But EMI, big one, really is quite often a problem. Sometimes people think they qualify for business asset disposal relief, which is this 10% on currently only $1 million. And sometimes they don't because, again, the rules are quite complicated and a bit nuanced in some ways. So that can be disappointing. For us, in terms of planning opportunities that people don't want to miss, often people have shares in a trading business and they may qualify for a form of relief called business property relief for inheritance tax. For people a lot older than Parry who are selling their businesses, they might want to think about doing some inheritance tax planning around this time. All of these things are opportunities that will be lost once you've sold your business, and that's why it's worthwhile speaking to me or someone like me in advance of a sale. Just no one will charge you for a call like that to understand if there are any opportunities.
What I'm getting from this is a really strong sense that you can't fudge this and you can't busk it, or you can't just go through it and hope for the best. You've got to do the proper work, and you've got to talk to experts who know what they're talking about.
Yeah, look, if you are selling your business for cash and you're getting 100% cash, there's not a lot of magic there from a tax perspective if you don't want to do any planning for business property relief. If you're doing a private equity sale or a trade sale, you want someone to give you some proper advice. And the number of things that cross my desk that are just cleaning up other mistakes is phenomenal. Advisors like me make a lot of money. Yeah, advisors like me make a lot of money from people. It's very difficult though for people like Parry in a startup phase to work out what is worth spending the money on. And that's why I would always speak to a reputable advisor and say, is it actually worth that investment?
Is this something you need to think about even when you're setting the business up? Are there mistakes that are made on day one that take a lot of time or a lot of money to fix that it could easily be avoided?
It's not a mistake, and it's such a petty admin point, but when you buy employment-related securities, which Parry's securities in Phrasee would have been when he incorporated it, I would say somewhat ridiculously, you're generally advised to make a form of election, and generally people like Parry won't do it because they don't know about it. And why would they know about it? That, though, is fairly manageable. So, but it becomes more of a problem when 12 months after you own your business, you've got your employees, you really like them, and it happens to me all the time, and then people give some shares to someone, and they say, oh, he's really good, so we've given him shares, we don't think they're worth very much. That's not actually how it works. They will be worth something, there will be a tax charge, you need to work that out. So I would always say just to pick up the phone. People all advisors like us won't charge you for that call because we won't be able to. So always just get a bit of advice to check you're not missing anything, I would say.
Are you happy with this marking of your homework that's going on here?
So I think it's amazing. It's such a bureaucratic failing on the part of HMRC, because what you do is you fill the form out and then you put it into a folder in a filing cabinet. You don't send it to anyone. You don't register it. So I bet that magically there are a whole bunch of these forms that just appear the day before an exit happens, dated for many, many years ago. And I completely guarantee that they're all legitimate.
That's absolutely true. I'm sure there are dishonest people out there. But you do file a form with the revenue to say employment-related security has been issued, and you do tick a box to say fourth year on elections have made. And now I'm worried, Parry, that you didn't do it.
It was absolutely done. There's nothing to worry about.
Anyway, it's all done now, yes?
It's all sorted now, yeah.
Have we passed the warranty period? I believe we have.
Well, you've not probably passed your tax return period, but anyway.
And you've got your money on the checks cleared, yes?
It's fine. No. Look. We're actually very fastidious about doing all this stuff correctly, and we made sure all of our employees' stuff was issued correctly. We were actually very, very focused on that from an early day. But I've heard horror stories about people who have gone through and they don't get HMRC clearance before doing an exit, and then the tax man comes collecting for the pennies on your eyes kind of thing.
Yeah, look, and on that, a really, really common one that we see actually is that you see, I've got this at least twice at the moment. 3 people set up a business, 3 founders. One of them actually incorporates the business and the other 2 kind of just sit alongside them. But everyone's intention is that it's going to be a third. But nobody does it properly, but they know that's how it's going to be. And then they come to us 5 years later when the business is worth 50 million, let's say. And they're like, oh, we've not yet transferred them over. Okay, is that okay? Can we just transfer, I don't know, 16 million pounds worth of shares to me? And that's quite difficult. So I would say that it would be the key point for me is get your shareholdings in order. When you make the decision to give someone shares, give them shares. Get a bit of tax advice, but give them shares.
Why private equity? Did you have other options for selling the business?
Yeah, so this is in late 2021, the tech market was still hot. And it was a very acquisitive market, both from private equity and trade buyers. We had a huge amount of interest from both trade and private equity. The problem with going trade is that you need to have, those purchases are often not made rationally. They're made for political reasons, and you need to have just the perfect timing. And timing is just hard to make the stars align. Whereas with private equity, as long as they have dry powder, they can make a deal happen. But the reason why, to be honest, was the deal made the most sense. It made all of the investors who we were capping out a bunch of money. It made sure that the employees still had agency in the direction of the company instead of being enveloped into a big corporate. And then ultimately, it made sure that me, my co-founders, and all of the employees still have skin in the game to take it to the next level. I think there's no right way of doing things. There's no there are things that I think would have been beneficial of going trade sale, and there are upsides to private equity also.
But private equity worked for you and for your circumstances.
It worked for us. It worked for our circumstances. It de-risked all of the shareholders materially, and ensure that we still have an interest in the company moving forward. So it's a good outcome for everybody.
And you stayed in the business for a little while afterwards?
Yeah, about a year and a half.
What was that like?
Well, so first of all, the actual transaction process is exhausting. I mean, it is absolutely exhausting. We spent 6 months. I mean, and it's not just the amount of work, it's the existential dregs. If the deal falls over, what do you do then? You can't go back to market for 18 months. And a lot can happen in 18 months. You've got this sort of this real worry. And then once the deal closes, you're like, you should feel a moment of elation, but you're so drained at that point. You just want to sleep, right? And you get a bunch of money transferred to your bank account and you just don't feel good about it because it's just been such an arduous period. So then the thing is, like, then it's day one again, and you got to break in new investors, and they have to break you in. You have to understand, each other's nuances, because you're doing this weird sort of dating dance beforehand, but you don't know what they're actually like when they wake up in the morning and don't have makeup on, kind of thing, right? So it is a feeling out period, which has upsides and downsides. There have been some really positive movements. They've been very supportive of the business and the plans. There's also been some teething moments and some moments of conflict and whatnot. I think that, it was the right thing for the business. The business is in a good place now with new management and new leadership, and me just sort of like being a board guy who shows up once in a while, which is what the business probably needed regardless of the transaction. If an entrepreneur wants to continue doing things their way, and not have a higher level of scrutiny that you get from a majority private equity owner, then I would not recommend it.
So there's a payoff there. Money versus control.
Absolutely. Where, like, we were previously backed by a combination of angels and VCs. And it was purely governance, just making sure we weren't doing anything absolutely stupid. Although, actually, we closed our Series A round in, I want to say, September 2018. And the day after, we had a big party where we hired, like, branded helicopters. And it got written up in the Evening Standard. And I got a call the next morning from our board guy. And he's like, I just saw this thing. Have you spent all of our money on helicopters? And I'm like, don't worry. Don't worry. I got a discount. But yeah, so you definitely, like the difference between minority VCs and majority PE, of course, is that with minority VCs, you kind of run the show still. And they're not subject matter experts. They have very diversified interests, so they just sort of let you go. You send them a report once a month. They ask a few questions, and that's kind of cool.
So they put up the money, but they're not looking for control. Whereas the private equity you sold to, they took a majority stake in the business. They were in charge from the point that the check cleared.
Correct. And private equity, I think, tends to be more interventionalist than VC is. And with that comes good things and bad things.
Because they bring skills to the table.
Yes. Yeah, they certainly do. They have skills. They have access to more types of capital. I mean, a lot of private equity business planning is predicated on leverage, whereas with a pure VC business, you generally want to keep leverage down because they can make fundraising in the future quite difficult.
I think that importantly, though, all PE houses are different. You will have a very different experience with a big American PE house than you have with a small mid-market UK PE house. So I think for me, it isn't just selling to PE, it's who your PE buyer is.
And is private equity the right choice for you? And that's a decision that feels like it's an individual decision.
I think it's a really important decision for people to make, and I think they need to understand, as Parry said, it's a dating process. I'm not being at all negative about private equity, but everyone's on their best behaviour, including you, Parry, during that sales process. And when things are going well, I think it's all fine, but there are going to be tough times. There have been tough times post your sale with the way the world has been, just for everybody I know who sold kind of late 22 or late 21, early 22, there have been tough times since then. And that's quite hard when you've got a major investor behind you with business plans that you presented to them. That's quite difficult, isn't it? And
of course, they have their own objectives that they want to achieve. There is a reason they bought your business.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not in the business anymore.
Well, I still serve on the board, but I'm not operational.
Fine. So what do you do with your time now?
Well, this all happened quite recently. September 1st was my last day. So the first week, I slept. The second week, I went on a few walks. And then the third week, I got bored. So I decided that I wanted to relearn how to program. I haven't programmed since the late 90s. I studied it in Canada many, many moons ago. And it turns out it's kind of like riding a bike, and it's way easier these days. There's so many more resources, and you don't need to talk to your like weird TA from Newfoundland. That actually happened to me. The guy was named Ken. He was from Newfoundland, and you could never get a straight answer from him. Now you can go watch a YouTube video. You can use ChatGPT. All these different tools exist. So it turns out I was pretty good at it. So I started just playing around, doing a few things here and there, and then the light bulb went off. So actually, yesterday, I founded my latest company. It's called Amigos. It's like amigos with AI in the middle, because we should all be friends with AI. And what it is it's completely unique AI-generated stories for children, which are then presented in multimedia formats. So think about it like this. My eldest son is called Axel, and he loves Coast Guards. He's obsessed with Coast Guards. Like what happened to... I blame the parents, first of all. But he wants stories about Coast Guards. The thing is, if you go to the library, there's no stories about Coast Guards. So what you can do is you can, through a natural language interface, give these parameters to the system, and it will produce a super high quality story about Axel pretending to be a Coast Guard. And then it can generate imagery to go along with it to upload to your Kindle or print out as a physical book.
Oh, so it's not just the story. You can get the book.
Absolutely.
This is really niche bespoke publishing.
Well, you can't get the book yet. I haven't built that yet.
That's the next stage.
And I spent this morning fighting with Amazon Web Services. Little rant here, right? Why is that system so hard to use? If you ever meet someone from there, tell them that I've got a bone to pick with them. But then, and then basically, I eventually turn it into an animated short where it's completely unique to your child. And the great thing about this is the reason why the light bulb went off is last summer we went to a static caravan park in Devon because, when you sell a business at a really high valuation, you got to spend it somewhere, right?
This is how tech entrepreneurs roll.
Exactly. And honestly, I think a static caravan is the best holiday going. It was absolutely lovely.
You need to upgrade to a canal barge. That's placid on a whole different level.
But so the complex had this shared swimming pool. And my son, he had just turned 4, and he's convinced that he's like Michael Phelps. But I'll tell you what, he is not. And so we needed to reinforce in him pool safety rules. And I'm telling him, you can't go to the pool without mommy or daddy, no running, listen to the lifeguard. The 3 core rules, they weren't sticking. So I had been playing around with this system, and I wrote a little story about it. Which is about Axel and his little brother Magnus going to the pool, and it was a story about lifeguards and pool safety. And I read it out to them, and they retain the knowledge. So that's why I think there's actually something to this. We spend so much time trying to teach children with textbooks and with all of these things, but if we can actually make it a story, then it's much more interesting. The knowledge retains. And I don't mean it's going to teach them about math. Use a textbook to learn about math.
No, but it's the power of storytelling.
Exactly.
And of making that emotional connection.
Exactly. So I'm pretty stoked about it. The thing that I'm going to do differently this time is this company is not of existential importance to me. I've got money now. I don't need the company to be $1 billion company, and I don't need it to be 100 people. What I want this company to be is something which will just be a bit of fun. And I've decided that if I stop having fun with it, I'm just going to shut it down.
What are your thoughts on the opportunities that AI offers to Britain? We had that big summit with the Prime Minister and various other people just a little while ago. Are we right to see such great sort of bounty of opportunity in the future from this? Or are we kidding ourselves?
I think AI presents huge opportunity, but it comes with a number of challenges also. The way that I think about it is, if you think about the cotton mills in Lancashire back in the day, and the Luddites coming in with their hammers to bash all of the machines and whatnot. I mean, there's no point to fight the technology. The technology is here. So like anything that's trying to put like speed limits on it, the pace of government is too slow to keep up with the pace of technologies. That's just a complete waste of time. But ultimately, what the opportunities are is, if you think about design 30 years ago, right? Before Photoshop was ubiquitous, you'd have a dude in a little corner somewhere, and he'd be drawing something, then he'd send it off to the printer, who would put it into a litho machine. They would print it all out. Then Photoshop came out, and Mr. or Mrs. Designer was saying, well, that's existential for me. They're going to put me out of work, and I'm not going to use Photoshop. I'm going to keep drawing. I don't trust this newfangled stuff. And now those people are going to the job center because nobody wants to hire them. The people who adopted this new technology are the people who are really pushing design forward. And you would never hire a designer now who doesn't use Photoshop, right? That's what the new advent of particularly these generative AI tools are doing. You don't have to use them. You absolutely don't have to use them. But what they can do, much like Photoshop makes designers more efficient, generative AI can make you more efficient at many, many things. I think all of the dread that people say it's going to come take our jobs, it's going to change our way of life, this whole thing about sentience and all of this stuff, I mean, that makes for good science fiction books, one of which you could probably write with AI. But the reality is people always find a way. 10 years ago, there is no such job as a YouTube content creator, and now Mr. Beast makes 250 million quid a year.
What I hear from other people is that where it will create opportunities in business is when you use it alongside your existing talented people to make them more productive. It's about augmentation rather than replacement.
I think we're certainly finding that now. But that's because we are effectively applying new technology to legacy software and processes. What you will find over the next 5, 10, 15 years is that you're going to start finding new products, new processes that are AI first. A good example is this new app which I'm launching. It is made AI first. There's nothing that I need to re-engineer to make it AI first. And this is what you're going to find. It's like now, you're finding all these big enterprises that are saying, and now we use AI. And they got a little star on their website and they put their prices up and whatnot. That's table stakes now. But what they are is they are effectively legacy processes and legacy companies who are trying to retrofit. It's like trying to drive a Model T Ford and sticking a Tesla engine in it. But sooner or later, you're going to buy a Tesla.
So the world that your boys, your sons who you mentioned, the world they're growing up in, you're content, you're confident that it's going to be as good a place for them as it was for you?
I am absolutely not, but it's not because of AI. I think that there are many more concerns. I personally think the biggest risk that mankind face, just from a pure technology standpoint, is social media, where there is no concept of truth. There is no concept of shared purpose. There is no concept of being surprised and delighted by anything in the world anymore. And that's what the internet and social media have given. I think what AI will do will have good effects and bad effects, but you know what? The horse is left the stable. And until we find a way to ensure that our kids are not continuously exposed to the megalomania of social media influencers and the misinformation of content creators, then we're going to have far bigger problems than AI can solve.
Parry, Susie, thank you both very much for sharing your conversation and your thoughts with us. If you'd like to listen to other Brave Business episodes, you can find them on your favourite podcast service. Or for further insights to help entrepreneurial businesses, you can visit Blick Rothenberg's Entrepreneurs Hub. It's www.blickrothenberg.com/entrepreneurs. I'm Declan Curry. This has been the Blick Rothenberg Brave Business podcast. Thank you so much for being part of our conversation.